A banged up David Pastrnak could be bad news for the Boston Bruins. What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a pared down, bare bones episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, and it is Tuesday, December 10th. I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. It's free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today we're having some technical issues on the regular hosting site on which we record. So I'm coming to you from Zoom, no graphics, none of that, but just plain old Boston Bruins talk, which is what you come here for anyways. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. It's all available at fanduel.com. Just check it out today to get started. And before we get started, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. And you can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes, at Ian C. McLaren. I am a lifelong Boston Bruins fan. Been hosting this podcast for various outlets been covering this team for various outlets for about 20 years. Worked for 5 years as a hockey news editor at The Score, and I've been hosting this podcast since 2019. And today we are discussing David Pastrnak injury issues as well as tonight's upcoming game against the Winnipeg Jets and updating the Eastern Conference power rankings. Let's begin by discussing David Pastrnak. Now, Pasta did not practice on Monday, and interim coach Joe Sacco said he's dealing with an upper body injury that did not require them to bring an extra forward on the trip. They do have Tyler Johnson as a placeholder. He was on the line with Pavel Zacha and Morgan Geekie in practice. But Pasta, who's already underperforming this season, if he's banged up to the point where he can't play or remains, I don't want to say he's been ineffective, but his numbers, as we'll see here in a moment, are quite down from regular pace. It could be a problem here for the Bruins as they get set to take on some tough teams coming up in Winnipeg, especially. They'll play the two Alberta teams next week. They have a game in Vancouver on Saturday, and they'll play Seattle as well on Thursday. So if David Pastrnak, who's their best player, their best offensive threat, if he's not at 100%, which, I mean, I guess we can assume that he hasn't been here for a little bit, and if he's not firing on all cylinders, then it's a problem for a Bruins team that is struggling to score so far this season. And if you look at David Pasternak's numbers so far this season, they are uncharacteristically poor, let's say. He's on pace for only 76 points, which would be 34 fewer than last season. And currently he's only got 9 goals through 29 games, which would put him on pace for 25. And he hasn't scored at that level since his sophomore year in the NHL, when he had only 15 goals in 51 games for the Bruins back in 2015-2016. He hasn't scored fewer than 30 goals 34 goals since his third season in the league, 2016-2017. He did score 20 goals in 2020-21. That was a COVID-shortened season, and he had 20 goals in 48 games. So clearly at a better than 25-goal pace. Now, part of the problem is his shots aren't going in as frequently as they did in the past. And he's currently rocking a 7.8% shooting percentage, which is well below his 13.7% success rate that he's averaged over his career. Last year, he scored 47 goals in 82 games, shooting 12.3%. 2 seasons ago, he had 61 goals in 82 games with a 15% shooting percentage. This year, he's only at 7.8%. And on a regular track, say he was shooting his regular 13.7% based on the shots he has put up, he'd be on pace for about 44, 45 goals. So part of it is the fact that there's not as much zip on his shot, or he's not getting it past opposition as regularly as he did in the past. It's not a shot volume problem per se. It's just not going in as regularly. So you would expect some sort of positive regression here, but if he's feeling the effects of an upper body injury that's hindering him from succeeding when he is getting those shots on net, it kind of all amounts to this down season so far. He's only got 18 assists, which is still pretty respectable. He's on pace for 51 helpers, but that 25 goals, again, you would expect almost double that to put him back into 100-point contention. But because he's shooting almost half successfully as he did in the past, that is what is keeping his point totals down. So hopefully he can get healthy. Hopefully he can rediscover that shooting magic that flummoxes goalies regularly. And hopefully it can happen as soon as tonight against the Winnipeg Jets, because as good as the Bruins have been under Joe Sacco, 7-2 over their past 9. They've improved defensively. They've been outshooting the opposition. They've been killing penalties better than any other team in the NHL. The fact is they need to still get their scoring up more consistently. They're still struggling offensively, and David Pastrnak is a huge key to that, obviously. And they need him to get back to that 100-point level if they have any chance of succeeding here coming up on this road trip and beyond. And later on in the podcast, we will take a look at the Eastern Conference power rankings and who the Bruins are up against when it comes to this playoff push. Still a lot of season left, but there's no room for error here because of how the Bruins started and because of the hole that they dug themselves in, points wise and goal differential wise. It all begins tonight. A huge push here with a game against the Winnipeg Jets, and we'll preview that one here as the podcast continues. Today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks, and if you love sports, you're going to love Prize Picks. It's the best place to turn your sports knowledge into real money. Whether it's hockey, football, or any of your favorite sports, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in on the action. Here's why you need to get started today. You can win up to 200 times your money on Prize Picks. You get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. No need to win. The $50 is guaranteed. And Prize Picks also offers fun weekly promotions like Taco Tuesday, where select player projections are discounted up to 25%. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly at Prize Picks. Run your game. Let us preview tonight's game between the Boston Bruins and the Winnipeg Jets. It's an 8 p.m. Eastern start. Bruins are in Manitoba, having flown in. Again, there is an airport in Manitoba. I know there's a lot of rumors and reports out there that they do not have an airport. That is untrue. That is false. They do have an airport. I've flown in and out of it and enjoyed Swiss Chalet in there as well. The only Swiss Chalet in Winnipeg. If you're Canadian, Ontario, you know what I'm talking about. Swiss Chalet chicken. Although I might rank it below St. Hubert. But that's a question for another day. Tonight's game will be played between the Bruins and the Jets. The Jets are tied for the most points in the NHL with the Washington Capitals and the Minnesota Wild. However, they've played a couple more games and have a lesser point percentage than both of those teams. They're .690, which actually puts them fourth behind Washington, Minnesota, and the Vegas Golden Knights. In terms of goal differential, the Jets are second in that stat, plus 28 behind Washington. They are 4-6 over their last 10 games. So they are sliding a little bit, but they're 9-3 at home. And of course, Connor Hellebuck is always a threat to shut you out on any given night. They've scored the third most goals in the NHL, and they've allowed the fifth fewest. So, hockey's a pretty simple game at the end of the day. You got to score more goals than your opponents. The Jets have been doing that more regularly than pretty much any other team in the NHL this season. So add it all up, and it's going to be a tough go for our Boston Bruins. The Jets have one of the best power plays in the NHL as well. I believe they rank third in that respect. Now, the Bruins have had the best penalty kill in the NHL under Joe Sacco, but it's going to be really tested here tonight by the likes of Kyle Connor, Mark Scheifele, Josh Morrissey, etc. These are premier players in the NHL, and that's why they have a third-ranked power play, 29.1% success rate. The Bruins still dead last in the NHL, ranking 32nd with a 12% success rate on the power play. The penalty kills fairly even, although Boston's is ranked higher over the last several games, but overall, they're 19th. The Jets are 20th. Now, here's where things get tricky. If you look at goals for and goals against per game, the Jets rank 5th in scoring, 3.55 goals per game, and they're allowing only 2.59 goals per game, which is the third best defense in the NHL. Conversely, the Bruins are scoring only 2.59 goals per game, which ranks them 25th, and they're allowing 3 goals per game, which puts them at 14th. The Bruins are a +9 team under Sacco. They're still -12 overall in terms of goal differential, and part of that is because Jeremy Swayman has taken a lot of time to find his game. He's played 20 games now. He's 9-9-2, so that is a .500 record. Still got an .893 save percentage, only one shutout. He's been outplayed by Joonas Korpisalo in net, and Connor Hellebuck remains at the top of his game. He's 17-5-0 with a 2.14 goals against average and a .925 save percentage. Again, the Jets have slidden a bit. Slided? Tapered off a bit. They've 4-6 over their last 10. They've won only 2 of their last 7 games. That's against Chicago and Buffalo. They've lost to the Kings, Vegas, Dallas, St. Louis, and Columbus. So perhaps Boston's finding them at a good time, but they are pretty strong on home ice. And of course, a pretty formidable opponent overall. So it's going to be a tough go here for the Boston Bruins tonight, especially if the power play continues to not click, especially if David Pastrnak is not at his best or as effective as he can be, and especially if they run up against a very hot goalie, a very good, I wouldn't even call him a hot goalie, he's just perpetually good in Connor Hellebuck. So it's going to be a tough one for the Bruins tonight. I had said last week, my hope is that the Bruins can get at least 6 points on this road trip. This might be the toughest game of the 5, and hopefully the Bruins can pick up at least 1 point here against the Winnipeg Jets to stay in the Eastern Conference playoff race, of which they are now a part of, in a playoff spot. As we speak right now, we'll update the Eastern Conference power rankings here as the podcast continues. Get ready to tackle this weekend's NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, all in one place. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you once again for joining me here on Locked On Boston Bruins. If you're watching on YouTube, it's a bit of a different look today as our regular recording platform has had some technical difficulties. And we're trucking along here with the Eastern Conference Power Rankings. Now, if you look at the uh, points stats, you see that the Bruins are currently third in the Atlantic Division and sixth overall in the Eastern Conference. They are 1 point back of Toronto, 3 points back of Florida, and well back of Washington and New Jersey up at the top of the conference. They're 3 points ahead of Tampa Bay and 4 points up on the Rangers, who are currently in a bit of a tailspin, going 2-8 over their past 10 and losing 2 in a row, including yesterday to the Chicago Blackhawks. They lost on Sunday to the Seattle Kraken. So they're in a tailspin. They traded their captain, re-signed Igor Shesterkin, but a lot of their core guys are not performing. And their recent plummet has coincided with Boston's resurgence, and they've overtaken them in terms of a playoff spot and point percentage. If you look at point percentage in the Eastern Conference right now, and that's taking into account games in hand, Tampa has 4 fewer games played than the Bruins. They're 3 points back. There's 8 points on the table there. So right now, the top 5 in the Eastern Conference is Washington, followed by Carolina, Florida, New Jersey, Tampa Bay. Those are 6 teams you can pretty much lock into a playoff spot unless something disastrous happens on one of those sides. Then you have the Bruins in 6th right now in terms of point percentage. 15, 11, and 3 after winning 4 in a row, 569 point percentage, and however, they're still a minus 12 goal differential overall, which is, I believe, 5th worst in the conference, but they are plus 9 since Joe Sacco took over. So there's definitely a pre and post Sacco Bruins team that we're looking at, but the Bruins, of course, have only played one playoff level team in the 9 games under Sacco, and that was against the Vancouver Canucks, a game that they lost. Their other loss came against Pittsburgh, who has won 6 of their last 10 games and have jumped back up to close to 500. Now, helping the Bruins, like I said, is the Rangers' fall and the fact that there's a bunch of very mid to poor teams in this conference. You have the Islanders, Flyers, Blue Jackets all hovering around 500 with negative goal differentials. You have the Penguins who rose, but they're still at minus 26. And at the bottom of the conference, you have the perpetually disappointing Ottawa Senators, Detroit Red Wings, Buffalo Sabres, and Montreal Canadiens. The Sabres, Red Wings, and Senators have been teams that we wonder, is this the year that they will jump up into the top 4? Is this the year that they will challenge for playoff spots? All 3 of these teams at or below 500 over their past 10. Ottawa's 4-5-1. Detroit's 4-4-2. And that required a comeback win last night over Buffalo, who's 3-4-3. The Canadiens are 5-4-1 over their past 10 even, and they're only at a 446 point percentage. So helping the Bruins is the fact that the Atlantic Division teams below them remain just stuck in the mud, in quicksand even, can't jump into the playoffs spot to save their lives. There are some teams in the Metro who could challenge for a wild card spot, but right now you can pencil the Bruins in as a playoff team. All they have to do is hold off the Islanders, Flyers, Penguins, and Blue Jackets as 500 teams or below, and you're fine. It's a pretty easy task for the Bruins to get into the playoffs at this point. But again, this road trip that they're on is going to be very tough, going to be very challenging. All the gains under Joe Sacco will be put to the test, and you're going to want to keep it locked to Locked On Boston Bruins to keep up on all of it. Thank you so much for joining me here today on this kind of pared down episode. It's my second attempt at recording this today, which is always fun. But I just love talking about this team, and I'm hopeful about the Bruins, despite the fact that Pastrnak's banged up. They've made some good gains, and hopefully they can keep it going here on this road trip. Please do check out the Locked On Fantasy podcast next. Steal and Flip will give you all the insight you need to win your week, win your league. Please do subscribe to Locked On Boston Bruins on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. And please do take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. We'll be back here tomorrow to recap the storyline, stats, and signals from tonight's game against the Jets and bring you all the latest on the black and gold. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day.